That is a Robinia. Not much to look at this time of year. Lovely ferny foliage, wonderful trees. But we use them in the system because they're really good nitrogen fixers. And so they'll fix nitrogen for themselves, but then it's available to the other plants. And it'll just move through and fertilise your apple tree and actually grow up over the top of your apple tree and shade it quite readily. And so it's really handy for that. And it's pretty, and it produces a whole stack of stuff. There's another one which is similar, which is a Gleditsia. Kind of sweet. Oh. Again, really good nitrogen fixing trees. These are probably my favourite nitrogen fixing trees for inclusion in forest garden systems and in agroforestry systems. The Robinia is used extensively overseas in Europe as a timber tree. Not this particular variety, this is more for home garden, but the other ones are used extensively there.
How many metres?
Can grow about 20 metres.
Oh.
Yeah. Being a nitrogen fixer, of course, the advantage over what we use as timber trees, and they'll grow quite readily here, is they'll fix their own nitrogen, unlike pines that don't. And they also have a very light canopy, both of these trees, so you can grow grasses and things like under them. So you can actually use them in agroforestry systems like with cattle and sheep and things like that, and still have your grass.
Yeah.
But then you have a second career of wood production on top. The Gleditsia in particular is of enormous interest to permaculturalists and food forest people and things like that. I've got some notes here from the Agroforestry Trust, which is particularly good. And these actually produce seed pods that are edible to humans and animals. Particularly, they haven't got much of a rap. I've eaten the seeds myself, and when they're cooked, they've got to be cooked, and they're quite palatable. They're quite good. Now then, the pods contain 12% sugar, so they're really quite high in sugar. The young pods are tender and more like a bean, so you can cook them. So they're very useful. And you can eat the raw cooked on the young green seeds, so it tastes like peas. So they're quite a useful plant. The actual seeds contain about 30% sugar, also between 10 to 24% protein, 8% fat, very high in calcium and very high in phosphorus. So particularly good tree, and recently they were thought that they didn't fix nitrogen, but they have a very primitive. They don't nodulise. Most nitrogen fixing trees have a nodule. These don't. They have almost an internal thing, actually on the root system, like a little cup, and that's where the bacteria colonise.
John, are they frost resistant, either or both?
Yeah, absolutely. Being a deciduous tree, they're really good like that.
Yeah.
They don't tend to be extremely, in our climate, they're probably more extremely drought tolerant. And so they're particularly good, particularly the Gleditsia more than the Robinia. Other thing I like about both these trees in particular, well, both of them are really good for pollen. They produce a large, they flower only about 20 days, I think, but they produce a lot of honey and a lot of, very, very good for bees. They produce, Robinia in particular produces about half the quantity of that you'd use in an orchard, like for apples, of honey. So they're pretty good as far as that. Some of the systems overseas, particularly in Canada, they've been using Robinias and Gleditsias in orchard systems to provide pollen and nitrogen fixing directly from their trees. So it's very much proven. They also use this one in particular for cows. It's to directly, the pods are, when ground up, they're equivalent to oats in protein and all that sort of thing. So they're really useful from that sort of perspective. The wood. Yeah, the wood. What else do you get from a tree? Both of these species produce, can be rotated and pollarded and coppiced in an agroforestry system. So what that means is you actually cut them down. Once they've been in for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever, you actually cut them down and then they reshoot from the base. The resulting wood from that sort of practice is particularly good because they're really, really hard wood, untreated. The pole wood that results from that sort of treatment can go straight in and replace your fence post. Will go in the ground and last for 120 years, untreated. Yeah, beats a pine pole, a treated pine pole, as far as I can go. No, so a farmer could grow their own pole wood. They also use them. These guys they actually use for the Robinias they use for shipbuilding timbers actually.